Greetings mech warriors and welcome to Notwork Gaming. This is the start of a new series called Battletech Tactics that will be running alongside, hopefully, another series called Battletech Basics. Tactics is where we are going to talk about things you can do in the game once you have gotten used to playing the game. This is not about core rules and core rule concepts. This is about tips and tricks that you can use to get the most out of your mechs on the field and learn to exploit situations on the battlefield as they come up while you are playing. That's what we are here to do. And here, on the very first episode, we are talking about the secret art of doing nothing. That's right, doing nothing. That's crazy! I can hear the typing already. People responding. Doing nothing in a war game, that's absolutely nuts. Movement is life. They teach you that right at the basic level. You will find content creators, you will find players on forums, on Discord, on all kinds of chat services, Facebook pages, and when they offer advice, you will see movement is life. And all of the people offering that advice, giving you that information, saying movement is life, they are right. They are 100% correct. I'm not saying that you stand there and literally do nothing in the movement phase of the game. The art of doing nothing talks about the other actions you can take in Battletech. Other things that you can be doing which don't look like you're doing anything. Now, there's a lot of games out there that a lot of people play, and in a lot of these games you always want your miniatures on the table, no matter what it is, to be doing something, playing for the objective. Typically it means engaging with the enemy, shooting them, fighting them, manoeuvring them in some very active fashion, taking full control of every opportunity you get to roll dice with that unit. And one of the reasons for that is that many games, a lot of modern games now, and even not so modern ones, tend to have some form of turn limit. There is some form of limiter, meaning that you are going to play 4 turns, you're going to play 5 turns, maybe 6 turns, but that's it. So you do not get a lot of opportunities to make decisions on what to do with those units outside of what is the best active thing I can be doing with this model, with this unit, with this tank. Whatever game it is you're playing, you are wanting them to be most effective by engaging in some way with the enemy. Battletech can be the same. There are some scenarios where you absolutely have to do that if you want to win what is going on, but normally most Battletech scenarios are not that quick when it comes to number of turns. It's not uncommon to see turn 8, turn 10, turn 12, 14. A lot of them do cap at 12, but that's twice as much or 3 times as much decision time as you get to play with your units than you do in a lot of other games. And sometimes, especially when it comes to scenarios that are won with very specific events and they are not turn capped, then you can get even more turns out of this. And this turns into a resource, and those resources are opportunities for you to make decisions of what you want to do with a unit, and also what you want the other player or players to be doing with their units and influencing their play, which leads us to the art of doing nothing. Now, you still want to capitalize on your movement modifiers, but a mech does not have to be shooting every turn. It does not have to be engaging an enemy unit every turn to have an impact on the game, unlike, as I said, other games. If you judge what you're doing correctly, it is sometimes more effective, more efficient, a better strategy to remove your mech from the fight, to get it out of line of sight of things that may be shooting it. And it's very, very tempting to bite the bullet sometimes and step in and go, I have got a reasonable chance of making some shots. I'm on 7s, I'm on 8s, to make a few shots. Maybe I'm on 6s, and I can get in and do a bit of damage. But in the process of doing that, your unit is either going to have bad target movement modifiers, or even with good target movement modifiers, you are exposing yourself to dangerous short-range weaponry that make those movement modifiers mean a lot less. Maybe there's a lot of pulse fire, maybe there's targeting computers, maybe you're up against better gunnery pilots or good gunnery pilots that can ignore the bulk of your target movement modifier if you are presenting them as short-range target, especially with the tools I've just mentioned: pulse lasers, targeting computers, LBX cluster rounds, anything like that. And it's under those circumstances that simply getting out of the line of fire, dropping behind a hill where they can't get a line of sight to you, or getting behind 3 pieces of woodland, anything like that, is the better move. It's the better tactic. Yes, you're not shooting anything. Yes, you are not damaging anything. But you are not compromising a valuable unit on the battlefield just so it feels useful on a single turn. This is what you have to watch out for. Now, by the same token, you may be riding the heat curve, and you are down to firing just one weapon or just some small weapons, and maybe you've got a good movement modifier, maybe you've got a good positioning on a target and they've got bad odds to hit you. It can still be worth not taking that shot and once again removing the mech from the firefight for a turn or two, to let it get its heat down, to let it get its guns back in the fight, and to not present a target for minimal payoff. You can still be hit on a 9, you can still be hit on a 10, you can still be hit on an 11, and you can still be hit on a 12. And sometimes it's worth it, and sometimes it's not. And you've really got to ask, is this one medium laser going to have the impact I need it to have if I'm risking 10s for a full volley of fire that, if any of it makes contact, I'm going to be in trouble with this mech? It is a risk-reward assessment that you have to perform, and sometimes go, no, I do not need to be with this unit in this particular fight right now. And this applies the other way around as well, in that sometimes you might have a good bunch of shots with a small amount of weaponry, and yet with the way your opponent's been playing, the way that they are targeting things and that they want to do things, getting out of the fight can lure them away. It might try and make them engage with a preferred target, something that is wounded, something that is injured, not something that is necessarily critically down, because at that point you should be trying to get that unit out of the fight, or in a scenario play or a campaign play, or you're sacrificing it at that point. But with a unit that looks tempting, if you can move it to where they are going to really struggle to gain any good line on it, that can either save that unit, or it can force the opponent to make some bad decisions on what they are trying to do. It can force them to donate firepower, donate mechs, maneuver to try and chase down a problem unit where they would be better spending their resources elsewhere, but they have become myopic, they have become focused on the target mech, and they are now going to chase it. And you can be very clever with your movement and positioning to make people think that they they have some good options. This is again target movement modifiers. This is movement is life being used in a slightly different way. You are not expecting to return fire, but you can get people to move where they have slim chances if they're feeling greedy. Or you can use it to pull things off of other targets, but that's getting into a slightly different subject matter. Now, this idea, this concept of the art of doing nothing, of denial of target, which is what it really is, while you cool down, while you basically wait to get a better shot, while you are looking for other opportunities to use that unit better, you do have to look at the rest of your unit makeup, your company makeup, lance, whatever size of game you're playing, and make sure that this is not impacting the rest of your unit negatively. Because denying that target, doing nothing with that mech, could open up avenues for your opponent to be able to put 2, 3, 4 mechs on a target that they otherwise would not have done, and that can go bad. Conversely, it can encourage people to put a couple of mechs onto a target that can take it, good old zombie mech, and maybe that helps your plan. Maybe it does. Maybe that presents a single target or 1 or 2 targets while everything else that you've got is jumping out of the way, running away, doing nothing. And it will funnel concentration and funnel movement in a way that sets up for 2 or 3 turns down the line. Doing nothing is not idleness. It is setting up the battlefield to fight the fight that you want to fight. You don't engage on the opponent's terms ever if you can avoid it. Sometimes you do not get that choice. And if you are stuck in that situation, then again an assessment of the field and working out if you can pull something out where it's not having an impact, or its impact is going to be minimal for the returns it's going to take, or the possible returns it's going to take, can absolutely be the way to go. This can work 3 turns in when mechs are starting to pair off, you're starting to see dueling couples happen, or combat triples, and you pull something out, and again their units are completely out of position and they need to move and they can't engage what has just run away, so they try and engage something else. Those shots are wasted, their positioning's gone, they should have chased you, and that can spin a fight, that can absolutely win an engagement in Battletech, because your unit is working in such a way that you can afford to have mechs not shoot. It is desirable to have mechs not shoot, to use the movement of the field and manipulation of target priorities, target availability, to dictate the course of play to your adversary. It's very, very, very useful, that. And the intentions of those interactions are what can absolutely completely change a battlescape. You can be on a completely losing foot, you can be fighting uphill, and if you can see the opportunity and you can just get out of that fight to re-engage on slightly better terms a turn or 2 later, then those couple of turns where you have not been shooting, you have not been rolling a lot of dice, your turns have possibly been very quick and only movement, it can completely catch people off guard. You can completely swing the scenario, swing the engagement, just by doing nothing for a turn or 2. Now, up to this point, it's been movement is life. It has been moving to do nothing. Doing nothing essentially means not shooting, not making physical attacks. You can do nothing in the movement phase, and it can throw people, because movement is life. But it is possible, if you need to maneuver things a certain way, you need the other side to set up in certain ways, you need to bait a target to do a bad move of sitting still, where sitting still looks dangerous, and it's only going to work if 1, you can afford to lose that unit, or 2, it's early enough, big enough, or you've managed to manipulate the situation enough that that unit that is now sitting still, possibly with not great fields of fire as well, it's called bait, will do the work for you. It'll draw things in, it'll make other things sit still because they think they are safe. The other side looks at what you've done and they go, ah, I've got a sniper unit, it's sat in a wood, it's got a good line of fire, it's got a moderate rate to hit. We had this exchange last turn and it was close, but now you're not moving. That makes it so much easier for me, and I've got all the defensive stuff that I could want. And they sit it still. Because of course they do. Especially heavy units. Heavy units are going to do this a lot. Heavy units tend to grind to a halt at some point, to slug things out, relying on armour more than movement. And it's a legitimate style of play. It 100% works. But if you trick them into doing it early enough, then your other units, especially units that may have disengaged, now have good engagement targets. They can now get back in the fight. That unit that didn't move, that does have all the cover in the world from one angle, might only have that hex of wood from a slightly different angle from a unit that pulled out or has been carefully manoeuvring. Which brings us to early game doing nothing in a roundabout kind of way. Because I've spoken about disengaging, I've just very briefly, because there's not a lot to say about it, spoken about just sitting there in the open and taking a hit or inspiring people to shoot you and therefore dictating motion. There is early game manoeuvring, which essentially does the same thing as disengagement. The difference in being is you intentionally do not engage with units, typically flanking units, for a few turns as you're moving in. Now normally there's not a lot shooting on turn 1, normally, unless you have a scenario that deploys people further into the map or gives you space on the map to deploy a lot of things very, very close to one edge or another, where the other side is coming on from. But in other types of fights, and even in these ones, because it's usually the person coming on that will dictate where the engagements happen, it can be very, very useful. Again, with flanking units, but it hasn't got to be flanking, well, it can be flanking units, but it hasn't got to be units that are fast. Normally flanking units are seen as fast units, they're cavalry types that go around the sides. But it doesn't need to be this, it can be anything at all that you want to engage or hit at a certain time in a certain way. If you want to force a flank, if you want to force a position, it can be very good to not be exchanging fire as you are bringing units in. It can be very, very, very good to put units, even powerful units, strong units, big units, where they are not going to be getting shot at as well as providing fire. You want them essentially to get into a position to alpha strike with something devastating, with good numbers, good odds, works best against limited manoeuvrability positions, but it's not limited to them. You can catch a commando off guard with a Night Star surprisingly easily with just a little bit of play. That means that mech isn't shooting for a couple of turns, but it is getting into a position, it is getting in to where you want it to be. Now you need to manipulate the other side's play to make sure you've got those targets. Sometimes that's easier, sometimes that's not. But again, taking a few turns of not firing from the start of the game into the early game, into the mid game. I wouldn't leave it much later than mid game, because otherwise you are then compromising your ability to actually engage with combat loss groupings. But you can completely, again, smash a formation, win a scenario, win a game by denying a target, by having a mech that's walking up a table and otherwise doing nothing. So a little food for thought. Something to think on there when you're playing your games, when you are jumping around with jump jets, when you're running around the field with fast units, when you're using slower units as well, are the different ways that you can not only engage but disengage to later re-engage, set yourself up for later turn play. And the way you do that is by stepping out, or not engaging in the first place, doing nothing for a couple of turns. And that concludes today's lesson, Mech Warriors. Have fun out there, experiment with the tactics, and I'll see you next time. And please, like and subscribe. Not Work Gaming, out.